welcome and I appreciate you joining us today, Professor. Uh, Very interested in chatting with you about an area that you've become expert in your teachings and research there at Colorado State, and that is the whole idea of meaning and purpose in lives. And during this season of spring, where we have both Easter and Passover fast approaching, we've been on a bit of a journey. We've been on a bit of a journey to explore the questions of purpose and meaning, what relationship they have to faith and religion, how we think, and consequently, how do we think about the end of life and afterlife? So everyday conversations that you usually have on the bus in the morning on the way to work.
Some
But it's
people
a
do.
journey of interest of mine, and I'm very delighted to have an opportunity to speak with you about it because you've made meaning and purpose the centerpiece of your research. And how did that come about?
Well, thank you, Jim, for having me on your show and for tackling big questions. These are not the type of questions that we have conversations about often enough in public, I would say. We issue our perspectives and we launch them into the world, and we don't dare take any pushback or any critical thinking on it. So I think it's in this time when there's a lot that we have to figure out and a lot of things seem uncertain. I think being able to be just chatting about the topics that you raise, whether it's the meaning of our lives, what happens when we're dead, what's the role of faith and other human institutions and experiences and spirituality. I think those are the exact questions that I wish people just felt fine talking about on the bus, actually, every morning. So at least that's the type of question I always had on my mind growing up.
You've always had an interest, huh?
I've had an interest in something like this, right? So I grew up in a rural area. Well, originally we lived in Buffalo, New York, and had kind of a diverse, interesting life as I remember it. We had, my folks would have friends over from all backgrounds. I think Buffalo has lots of kind of slightly rough neighborhoods, and we were in one of those, but it wasn't terrible. And
Yeah.
so just learning the landscape.
When you could get out of the house, when the snow wasn't so deep that you.
Yeah, we were there in 76 and 77, which we have pictures of my dad standing in a snow cave we made.
Is that
he was
right? Yeah.
he was 6'4" at the time. So
What did your folks do?
my dad is a psychologist, and my mom, for a while, was teaching English as a second language with refugees from Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. That particularly was a big.
Was there a large population there in the Buffalo area?
Not in the Buffalo area. This happened when we moved to Minnesota, rural Minnesota. So the Lutheran Church in Minnesota was quite active in the 70s with its refugee outreach and welcoming program. We used to welcome, folks who were in need back in Minnesota, and my mom was doing that kind of work. We were always actively involved in the Catholic Church growing up. So I think that led to a lot of service mentality for my mom, and then she later became a financial planner once kind of that wave of folks had come through the 70s into the very early 80s. So, but that transition for me was interesting because I think the questions I was trying to figure out when I was in Buffalo was like, how do you make friends? How do I avoid getting sent to the principal's office every day?
Again.
Like that. Again, yeah. Yeah, I remember Buffalo used to had a successful hockey season one year, and I had like this little Think Stanley Cup T-shirt on as a kid, and I just remember the teacher was just pointing at it, saying like, "Listen to your T-shirt and think before you speak." Like I just like, so I was a little rambunctious, and then we moved to this area in Minnesota that it just seemed like everyone was on the same page about everything.
Yeah,
even though they were like, it was mostly a Christian place.
Rural Minnesota?
Rural Minnesota. I mean, kind of a larger town there. But if you just think of rural Midwest, I guess, and all of the Sinclair Lewis novels you might have read or whatever it is, it just seemed like everyone had already figured life out. And it wasn't the set of questions that I was interested in asking. And it didn't fit with the way I experienced life. So I just was fascinated. Well, initially I was very confused because I didn't fit in, right? And so I just didn't understand how everyone from this little place that I knew wasn't the only place in the world, because as an 8-year-old I'd already been somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But they just were so confident, it seemed like, from the outside, and so much in agreement, not only about, where the good pizza is in town, or, where you're supposed to go, if you want to have a good time, but about the nature of the universe and what we're supposed to do as human beings in the world. And I could not understand that kind of certainty. And then even beyond that, I couldn't understand how they all agreed. So that was the fascination I had when I was young.
And what was in that part of Minnesota? What was the geographic, ethnic origin of the majority of the people there?
That part of Minnesota is actually quite interesting. Well, I mean, compared to the rest of Minnesota, it's not all Norwegians and Swedes. There certainly were some Norwegians and Swedes, but there were quite a lot of Belgians in this little part of.
Mm,
So we knew like how to pronounce names like Luwaji, Borboom, like all these like wild names. There's a little pocket there, and there's a little pocket of Icelanders down the road, 13
really?
miles. Um, and then,
And,
but then, pretty much it had kind of a mix of Catholic and Lutheran in the town. That with some evangelical Protestants. Yeah.
and what do you think brought about that uniformity of thought? Is it the work ethic? Is it the being close to the land and being in the agricultural world, where there's 7 days a week of daylight and nighttime and work?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of work, and for your older listeners, there are definitely some Norwegian bachelor farmers out there. And there was something about that frontier. We were actually geographically more similar to South Dakota than the rest of Minnesota. Like we had a
Mm,
deep stain on our honor. We did not have a lake in our town. And if you don't have a lake, you don't have a lake that freezes. If you don't have
yep.
a lake that freezes, you don't have good skaters. If you don't have good skaters, you don't have a good hockey team. And if you don't have a good hockey team in Minnesota,
Yeah, nowhere.
why are you even around? Right. Yeah. So maybe it was that deep mark of shame that we were all bearing collectively for not having, we didn't even have a high school team. We didn't have a high school hockey team. So clearly we had done something wrong in the eyes of an angry God. But, I think that there's a couple things that were going on there, and some of which is beautiful and some of which is just a little, I'm not sure it always works in our favor. So one of the things I definitely remember was anybody who needed help for anything got help for anything. Like it was a pitch in, everybody pitched in. You'd pitch in for your worst enemy. You'd pitch in for the person who you disagreed with at the last time you saw. Like you
Yep.
just pitched in, and we were in an area of wind and snow, so people were constantly, it would get cold. It
Losing a
would get,
roof and
yeah, I get -30, and with 40-mile-an-hour winds. And if you're out on the highway and your car got stuck, you'd be gone. Or so
yeah.
there were always people, I think, looking out for each other. And so that
Mm.
creates a sense of cohesion that I think is very beautiful and very human. The other side, I think, doesn't always work in our favor. Is the feeling that we're part of a little group. I mean, it wasn't that little. It's like 9,000 people, but it felt like everyone knew everybody, and you're part of a little group.
Yeah.
Everyone knew everybody's business, and anything you did down, like when you're biking around with your friends, eventually your parents heard about. And it kind of felt like there's like a little space each of us had to run around in. And if you got too far out of it, then not just one or two people would turn against you, but everybody would turn against you, right? So
You've obviously thought about these issues a lot
yeah,
through your personal life and your professional life, and there's something special about, even though it's a small community, you still grow up feeling like you're part of something bigger.
yeah,
You have a common enemy, or common threat in this case, the elements.
yep,
Uh, you were different from the other people in the broader community around you because of the lack of a lake.
yeah, that's right.
It's interesting. Is a friend of mine. Her name is Ambassador Shabazz, and she does a lot. She does a lot of work. She's the ambassador at large for the country of Belize.
Man,
Uh, Also happens to be the oldest daughter of Malcolm X.
I was gonna say that's a famous last name.
It is, and unfortunately was there with him on stage when he was assassinated all
Oh,
those years
geez.
ago. But she's a wonderful woman, and just a caring, giving woman, and that's her mission. I would describe, of all the things that she's been involved in over her lifetime. She's been a real advocate for bringing a sense of you're part of something bigger to the community she works in. She has a program in Newark, New Jersey, where she said so much of the problems, the opposite of your upbringing, is that people don't feel like they feel like they're alone. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why gangs can sometimes be attractive alternatives for young people, because it's their one sense of belonging to something, being part of something bigger. Family units not necessarily being what we would used to describe as intact. And her whole mission is to create senses of community where people know they're part of something bigger. And she's taught me that even in my family, which is I'm blessed. I have a wonderful family, a wife who puts up with me for a long, long time, three adult children, all of whom married well, and all of whom are good parents, and seven grandchildren. And I find myself thinking about her work a lot with my grandkids, trying to give them a sense of their parts. They're part of something bigger in several different instances. Part of our family, the nuclear family, the 15 of us. Part of the broader McCann family, where there's an army of us. We have a charity we're involved with called Smile Farms, where we create work opportunities for adults with disabilities, because I have a brother with developmental disabilities who works at Smile Farms, our charity. But getting our grandkids and nieces and nephews to be part of that, knowing that they have a responsibility beyond themselves. So I just listening to you as you've thought about and analyzed how uh, your upbringing, your community, your sense of being part of something bigger, even if it was small, contributed to your development. I think it's an interesting element that you probably studied very, very deeply across your students and all the communities that you work with in and around Colorado State and more generally. What do you think? How important do you think that sense of being part of something bigger, having a responsibility beyond yourself, beyond your house, because of your connection like that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's fun to like we think about this a lot. We think about the counterexample. We think about the blessings of or the good fortune of being in a good family. I think a lot of us know folks who had a rough hand for family,
Absolutely.
and so we can contrast that experience. I think most people have had at least some experience of feeling accepted by a group, even if a lot of other groups might reject them, and we can compare those experiences as well. But I think like one of the most interesting ways to take a counterfactual to this is to look at how belongingness can be used as a weapon, right? Withholding belongingness. When do we do that? Like when do we give
Mm,
someone outsider status? Whether that's as individuals or small groups or even as an entire nation, right? So we know that there's a powerful feeling about that. We know that that can turn someone's life upside down. And so I mean, anything that we can withhold that hurts when we pull it away, and
yeah.
that we know that we can use with various classifications, or giving someone the cold shoulder, or like spreading rumors that this person can't eat with this person at the lunch table, or you can't talk to this person at work. I think that says that we're withholding something that we really need deeply. And so
Sort of
that
weaponizes that sense of need.
Yeah, we have a need. There's been quite a lot of theories about this. Even in a very individualistic country like the U.S., like we're consistently among the most um, unique countries on the planet in terms of how much we emphasize individual uniqueness, and kind of the right of each person to determine anything they want in their lives, right? And that's pretty rare when you look back over human history, and it's quite rare when you look around the world today. But even in the United States, the research has been coming back to, and the theory has been coming back to over and over again, that we are social animals, right? We're terrible. Um, we're not the most feared individual out there if we don't have things that other people built for us, right? If we don't have
Hmm.
bows and arrows and swords and guns, no animal really fears us. We work best together. And when we're ejected, we feel very vulnerable because that's how we evolved. Like
It
that's
sounds so
grateful behavior.
primitive in bases.
Yeah. Like it's if we think about today, we have the ability to engage in enough transactions with sort of faceless people that it can feel like we don't need anyone, right? And I think that's a bit of a slippery slope trap, because I remember in the build up to COVID, just how many things people suddenly realized they needed that other people did in their lives, right?
Yes.
And we've already forgotten that, it seems like, just in a few years. So that sense that we we thrive in, a lot of people would argue that the reason our brains are so overpowered and oversized is that we've evolved to be able to process social information quickly without too much thought, but then with large consequences for our well-being. So if there's research out there showing, and they just have like little bad video games where it's just like a little hand and like a couple guys who look like the Pillsbury Doughboy pretending to play a catch with each other, and then you get to be one of the little hands down at the bottom. And if those little doughboy cartoon people don't pass the ball to you, research shows over and over again it hurts the person. Even
I've never
just
liked those doughboys. They've always been mean to me.
yeah, the doughboys, like we overlook them. They're rough. But yeah, they don't even pass the ball to me.
What role does that play in military life? You see the importance of belonging and badging and teamwork and the sense of being part of something bigger. The selflessness that often comes about with great military performance, and then you see it again in the veterans community. You see it particularly in Marine Corps, a smaller unit around a bigger armed forces, and the fact that Marines aren't retired Marines; they're always Marines. The vocabulary around that seems to play an important role in recruiting and belonging and how they work.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't something I've had a chance to do much research into, and I'll try to avoid um, talking about something I don't know too much about, especially when it's
Well,
what's
be more like me. I'll talk about anything.
well, I'll avoid that. But there's a research study by Thomas Britt. I think he was at Clemson. He might still be there at the time, and he looked into, one of the things I looked into for a while was meaningful work, like
Yes,
what makes work feel meaningful and a part of a good and rich life. And his approach to that was to look at the issue of morale in the military. And that I think the esprit de corps and the band of brothers, like that phraseology that comes
sure.
to us is a testament to a couple things. One is that we want a sense of belonging. I mean,
Yes.
that's our basic need here. The second is that to get groups to do well together, a sense of identity is super, super helpful, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the Dirty Dozen can do some good. I never saw that movie. I have to admit, but like that idea of like some stragglers come together for one job.
Yep.
It can work, but you're not gonna win a campaign with that approach. So having people who can be unified in what they're trying to do is good for any group, any organization. You can see that in businesses, you can see that in sports teams, you can see that in military.
Everywhere.
Yeah, but the other thing that it does is, and I think you see this with ideology in the world, is that people, aside from all this sort of stuff, that we don't want to feel vulnerable and we don't want to feel left out of a society, and that we want to know how to coordinate our efforts towards something that's going to make a difference. And we know that if we're just like throwing a cup of water on a forest fire, that's not going to do anywhere near as good as a coordinated group of firefighters, right? So those two things, we can be a part of something, we can make a contribution, we can connect, we can contribute. But underneath all that, or maybe next to all that, we do want to feel like we're doing the right thing, or that we are aligned with something that's valuable on an ideological basis, or I would think of an existential basis. And you can see that swinging in a lot of different ways when groups of people get together, right? You can see people justify enormous self-sacrifice for something that history will look back on and say that was a great thing. And you can see people sacrifice a lot from other people in order to do something that history will look back on and say that was awful, right? So that sense of like, okay, this is the truth about life, and I have to be a part of this truth about life, and that says I get to do this or I must do that. Like that's, I think when we look across human history, we see that also as one of the most notable elements of being a part of a group, is that when we're part of a group, if we adopt that viewpoint, suddenly things that were impossible or unthinkable before become possible and thinkable, both for good and for bad.
Listening to you say that, I'm just reminded how true that is in everything we see and do. This past weekend, we were in town, so sent a text to my 3 kids. Please let us know what the grandkids' sporting activities are this weekend. We'll try and get to as many of them as we can. And I have on the youngest side, I have the grandkids from 16 to 3. And we went to the 7-year-old, just turned 7-year-old's first baseball game of the season, which was hysterical. Uh, but the importance of which jersey they wore and the team getting together as a group and then describing what team they were and the Padres are going to have practice on this day and Padres and the other team over there. Oh no, the Padres are going to go have pizza afterwards. You can see it all starting so early. Now, the fact that my grandson didn't realize that after he hit the ball and he ran to first base, he wasn't supposed to take off the helmet, put it on the base and sit on it. There's some work to be done here. But the next night, the night before at dinner, we went to a terrific local Italian place we go to all the time called DiMaggio's. And the same son and daughter-in-law and the 7-year-old and his youngest sister, the 3-year-old, and she's talking about preschool and who are your friends and naming who your friends and where they go to school. You see all that formational stuff coming together about a group of friends, and she's having her group of friends over for a play date. And that need for community starts at the very earliest stages of our life. The need is so pronounced.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
And
don't think we quite.
then you have books and movies like Mean Girls who weaponize that need we have and turn it into a negative.
Yeah. I mean, I think that actually that there's that double-edged sword for everything. I mean, we would
Sure.
want to sideline certain groups because they're bad, and we also see people who like to sideline other people. Like that's kind of part of the element of bullying, right? To show that you're not part of the rest of us, or you don't have the backing of other people. You're not part of that esprit de corps.
Mhm.
So it is what we do.
Do you have a fraternity system at Colorado State?
I think so. Yeah, I'm a little bit out of that loop for sure. I mean,
But I mean, that's all about belonging, isn't it?
yeah, I don't know. I've not been involved in the fraternity or sorority system. I think um, from the outside, it looks like there's a significant identity portion, with rituals and markers of belonging, which is a clear sign that people want to project an identity and share it selectively.
It seems to me too, being an athlete gives people going away to college a distinct advantage from a community and belonging point of view. They automatically, whether it's in the housing or the activities, the time they spend in practice and competing and all, gives them a couple of steps up on the ladder of belonging right away de facto.
Yeah, I was at a conference called the World Happiness Summit in Miami, a little bit like 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Was it
And
depressing?
what's that?
Was it depressing?
Yeah, it was really beautiful, right? So usually I go to conferences that have a lot more leaning into data and science and things like that, and I find those inspiring as well. This one is really um, kind of mostly world class speakers talking about happiness, drawn on research in many cases, but it's meant to be applied, right? And I typically will talk about meaning and purpose, or sometimes I've talked about, the role of nature and well-being. And this time I just felt like we're missing this sense of collective or shared meaning. We don't have we struggle to create meaning that we can all participate in. So often it becomes, yeah, if you think about what the beautiful rituals and the beautiful passages of time and the beautiful neighborhood things that maybe we look back on nostalgically in our lives, part of what made my town the way it was is that everyone could believe in the same thing, right? I mean, I'm more of a questioner than a signer
Conformer?
upper, but I could see that was powerful, that they didn't have to think about certain things and they felt
Yeah,
like they
sure.
were right. And feeling like you're right in a world as chaotic as this one is a powerful substance. But I don't think we know particularly well how to recreate those historical sources of shared meaning. So I wanted to try to have a chance to try to create that. And so my talk was about what is it, what creates that sense of shared meaning, and is there anything that we've got up our sleeve that we can start using in a world that feels so fragmented and really now only seems to draw a shared meaning from tragedy or from finding an enemy to fight against.
Yes.
I think everyone prays for that a little bit too hard for that Independence Day moment when the aliens will come and unite humanity. But we don't need aliens to unite. We just have forgotten how to give it time and invest over time in things that we can all benefit from, whether it's spiritual, intellectual, or material. So I've been thinking a lot about this concept, right? And you know, things that we devote ourselves to, and to me, one of the purest forms of that is like a choir, right? Like when you're in a choir, um, which I'm not in, I should be, because I should take my own medicine, right? But like you think about choir, and choir is one that probably a lot of people were kind of made to do at some point in their lives, right? Like, you were
Yeah.
in a choir and you're supposed to sort of submerge a little bit into a group that's going to do something much more magnificent as a total than any individual voice. And in fact,
Sure.
you can make a choir of very ordinary voices that sounds pretty extraordinary. And so that sense that,
Who's the entertainer? I've seen him lately. He gets a whole arena to sing. Uh, I saw him. I saw something on YouTube that he did with uh, Chris Martin from Coldplay.
oh
They did the
yeah,
song
yeah, yeah,
"Fix You,"
yeah,
but he gets ordinary people, 20,000 people in an arena to sing together and to harmonize. And so, to your point, it's doable and it
yeah,
comes out beautiful. And if I
yeah.
were in that crowd, I could assure you there are not all good voices.
Yeah, so what happened to me was there was a concert violinist at this event, and I asked him to come on stage with me and help me because I told him my plan. My plan was going to be to have the crowd just hum the C major chord,
Hmm.
and then I hummed what I thought was a C, and he said that's an A flat. So I said, well, why don't you come on stage with me and make us have the right chord then? And he sent me actually the name of the person I think you're talking about. I know this isn't uh, necessarily gripping.
Jordan, would you look that up for us?
Yeah. So of course I can't think and talk at the same time. But yeah, so like that idea that when we're part of something really big, and I was, like I said, I was raised in a pretty strongly Catholic family, and that idea that you're going to say things together, you're going to sing things together.
You're going to pray together. You're going to ask grace together.
Yeah, and honestly, like when we just had snow recently, and out here in Colorado, and I put on, I was like, I'm going to lean into this. I had just a little bit of, um, I just had a little bit of tolerance left for maybe Christmas, I thought. So I put on some Christmas
Jacob
carols.
Collier. The performer's name is Jacob Collier.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Jacob Collier. Exactly. That's exactly who he was talking about. So, bringing people together, but like I'm one who will harmonize with Christmas carols on the radio, just to
Hmm.
be part of that feeling. And it's interesting, like not everyone has to be the lead to feel special in the choir either. Like the people who are the poor little altos, who never get the cool soprano parts, like they're making it all work. So I think that's a beautiful metaphor for what we kind of have a hard time recreating now. Like now we get people together to shout in unison at someone else. We
Mm.
have a really hard time getting people to sing together for something joyful.
So, if you're working with your students, or someone comes to see you after class and said, here I am at Colorado State. I grew up in a Catholic Lutheran community in Minnesota, and
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time adjusting socially here. Sounds to me like one of the things you'd advise them to do is go join a choir.
Jane and choir, or, because you mentioned athletes, and those can be really powerful ways of being part of a team, like that feeling of being on the floor. Like I did pick up basketball I was a runner and a swimmer, even though I'm 6'6", so I should have been a basketball player. But it kind of tells you a little. I was the tallest kid in the school, and the coaches didn't want me on the basketball team. So it tells you a little something about small town life, right? But yeah, so I was a successful runner and swimmer, and I just picked up basketball after college. And I love that. I love being out there. Even pick up basketball is a great metaphor, right? Because you don't
Sure
have the
is.
same teams. You don't even need the same uniforms. You just need to be able to recognize somebody on your team. Um, and so being a part of something is really great. And obviously Robert Putnam diagnosed this a long time ago, and this famous and much cited, but not much heeded book, Bowling Alone, right?
Yes.
I mean, people need to be involved in something else. But I'll flip that around. I mean, I think also that our teams should be on the lookout for folks to bring aboard, right? Because we put all the weight on lonely people. Learn how to make friends. Go talk to the coffee barista. Join a group, take a writing class, whatever it is.
Yes.
I think we can ask more of the people who are already hanging out with a bunch of people, knowing they've got a spot, and like trying to. I think teams should be trying to recruit lonely people a little bit more.
Interesting you say that. I've mentioned this many times, and I'll bring it up again because I was just reminded of it last night. Uh, I'm in my office on the 1-800-Flowers office on Long Island today. Last night we have an office in Manhattan, and we have a big break room, social room. It's a nice office, older building, but it's 18th floor and it has beautiful views and a outside wraparound terrace.
Mm.
It wasn't the greatest weather night, but we convened a group there last night that's involved in a charitable program supporting a health system in Rome. And so we had about 50 people gathered there last night for a little cocktail party to learn about this this charity and to see if they want to belong. And a friend of mine started this group to support this university, clinic, hospital, and research facility in Rome. And he said he asked me if I would help him convene a group of people who might be interested in getting involved. This was about 3 years ago. And then what he did was those who expressed an interest in learning more about it, he invited them to come for a weekend to Rome. And it was a fabulous weekend. This friend of mine curates events and meals and everything to the perfect degree. And of course, Rome is an awfully special place,
Good.
and it included visits to places you would never get to go to as a tourist. You had to be an insider. And so we
Well,
convened a group of
mm,
some of the veterans who'd been on that trip and people who might have an interest. And there's one couple there, Tom and Celeste Cox,
huh,
wonderful couple. And through this program, I've had the opportunity to get to know the both of them well. Uh, he's not Italian. She is Italian, and her father had recently passed away. And so it became, you're looking for those touch points. And this program became personal to her with the grief of losing her dad. They decided to create a scholarship in his name, a couple of scholarships in his name to support people who want to go learn, become physicians. And he's gotten involved. He's now president of the advisory board, the U.S. Advisory Board for Biomedico, the UCMB, the institution we're talking about in Rome. But when we convened last night, the point I started to make was there were a few people from my staff there here at Flowers who came in to help with the event. And what I'm so proud of is there were going to be a lot of people who didn't know anybody else in the room. Instantly, the room had a great buzz to it
mm,
because my team knows that I'm a recovering shy person,
mm,
and I've done a pretty damn good job of it, by the way. And and I work with my team, and the fellow who runs the office for us in the city, Paul, does a great job of taking young people and say, we're going to be putting on an event, so we're hosting it. Let me explain to you what hosting means. Not only is it setting up the room and the food and the beverages and all of that, but it's being sensitive to the fact that you have a responsibility to be social, to look for people, to get them involved, to make sure they're involved in conversations. If someone is standing alone, you're putting your arm in theirs, locking arms with them, getting the conversation going, introducing them to something else. So you have a responsibility, a social responsibility to make sure people are comfortable, that they feel relaxed, that they feel included,
mm,
that they're invited to speak, not just listen. And of course, our impression of meetings and events are commensurate with how much we talk. And I was so proud to see that that group came together so quickly because Paul and his team and the 3 or 4 young ladies who work on my team who just have become so good at that. So to your point that groups have to go outside and look, it by the way, it's the best way for you to feel comfortable when you know your job is to make other people feel comfortable
I like
and
that.
included.
Yeah. Yeah. It
And it's
reminds me of
something
another, sorry, it reminds me of
I've
another New York organization. I just wanted to, there's a guy, Nick Katsouris, who has a foundation called Lukumi Foundation. And what he does is he gets kids together to do good deeds. Like that's the whole thing.
yeah.
Like what you're saying is, reaching out as a host. I'm terrible at mixers, or I feel terrible at mixers. I think I do all right, but I don't ever like starting conversations with strangers is just it's heavy lifting for me a lot of times in these big groups.
That's surprising.
What's that?
Because that's surprising because you look down at everybody.
Well, I mean, part of it. I mean, no offense to the normal sized people, but like the conversations are happening about here, right?
Sure, that
So
that
I'm like,
that is an issue, right?
it is an issue. I can't always hear what people are talking about, and I also some people I just I feel like I loom over, and I don't want to be like a looming presence in their lives. But with Nick's group, he just gets kids to decide what kinds of good deeds they want to do together, and then that creates another sort of way, like hosting. The emphasis is on making someone's experience better, and that builds groups. And here he's taking kids, bringing them together, where the emphasis is on making things better for other folks, and that also builds a sense of collectiveness, right? Because if we see ourselves, we want to make an impact, right? Like you even look at some of our kind of terrible social icons, like the Joker, right? But the Joker doesn't want to feel pushed aside. The Joker's going to make an impact. Like people want to make an impact. They want to, and sometimes that finds horrible outlets. But if we show that you can be a part of something where you're making a positive impact, I mean, people find that really powerful. It feeds a lot of our different needs as a creature.
And in the work that you do, Professor, what how do you look at social media's impact on us with all that you've learned and studied and understand about our human nature, our human needs? What role is social media playing in complicating life for us? In what way?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been, I'll just say it's been quite a tradition to level the boom at social media as being a cause of a lot of societal ills. There's a big book out right now called The Anxious Generation that kind of places
hugely popular.
Yeah. So part of my background is in clinical psychology, right? So I've taught psychopathology, the science of psychological disorder for 20 years. And you see all these trends earlier. Now, there's times when things spike at different moments. In particular, anxiety seems to be part of what's going on for kids right now. But, I guess I would say social media mostly seems like a pretty bad waste of time. To me, based on the data, there's not a lot of direct evidence for individuals that I've seen that social media really messes up individuals, but somehow in social media is part of a society that seems corrosive. And so that creates a conundrum for giving advice about things. What I would say is that probably the biggest issue, among the biggest issues, the two biggest issues I see with social media, one is that it's just an extension of the internet. And the internet was a way where once there were like 3 or 4 bullies in your school who would try to make your life hell. Now anyone in the world can decide they want to try to make someone's life hell, and they can enlist bots or fake accounts or other similarly hostile people. So it's just kind of recreated a world where maybe even at random, and certainly for no particularly good reason, we can encounter human hostility. And that's never a comfortable feeling.
What role, negative role, does anonymity play in that situation in social media? I think that's the big contributor. When you can say nasty things and just generally be negative and not have it attributed seems to unleash the not so nice side of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, for the perpetrator, anonymity seems to provide permission, and it feeds into a bit of a dark side of human nature, where sometimes we want to lash out, and if we think that everyone knows that it was us, we double think it, and if we think we can get away with the perfect crime in that moment, I think we oftentimes will just go ahead and do it. The flip side of anonymity is maybe also even harder, because what it does for the person who's the target of anonymous attacks is it leaves open questions, right? So there's research on bereavement that shows that the people who suffer the most are those who cannot find a reason why their child died or their spouse died or someone that
Mm-hmm.
they love died. They're stuck in that, like, why did this have to happen? Could we have done something about it? And when we're being attacked by anonymous folks, we don't really have enough of a story to understand why me, why these things being said to me, or this hate being directed at me. So it leaves open that really important question of trying to make sense of what's going on. If we don't know even who it is or what their motive is, how do we make sense of it other than just saying the world is kind of crappy?
But on the other side of the coin, at that event we hosted last night at our Manhattan office, uh, a fellow and his wife came who he's a friend of mine, and we're part of a group of 4 that stay connected via social media. And I realized he came in, we were right back to last time we were together, which was probably 4 or 5 years ago. We were together in person. Now that feeling wouldn't exist for us if it wasn't for social media, that we feel like we've been connected, and it only took us some probing to say, well, when was the last time we were actually physically together? But I feel close to him, and I think the world of him, and it was so good to see him in the flesh. But because we've had this group of 4 people who stay connected, share jokes, share stories, sad stories, news, health issues, bereavement, uh, because we have that tool available to us now, our relationship didn't really wane in that period of time we weren't physically together.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I was going to sort of continue my original thinking or my initial thinking about social media, I don't think that there's a ton of evidence that's good or bad. I don't want to be like a Silicon Valley person saying it's just technology. Technology is neither good or bad. It's only how we use it. But that is kind of the case.
Yeah.
My first instinct was that if you start tracking all these sorts of things, the elevation of suffering and misery in our society, in many societies around the world, began spiking and increasing noticeably before the internet, before social media. So what seems to have happened over the last 15 years or so is that it's, you could even say, since the 2008 recession, not to bring up recessions or anything like that, but
Or the fact that you're predicting the next one, which, you're on the record now.
yeah, I'm on the record now. Everyone comes to me for financial advice, of course. But yeah, so there's just been an overall corrosion level in our society that I think people keep pointing to. Like, it doesn't feel right, it doesn't feel good. And social media's rise has been around the same kind of time. And I'll just say, like, I don't find there to be too much of a point with social media. I mean, if I want to connect with my old buddies from middle school and all that sort of stuff, we'll just set up a Zoom time, or we'll set up a chance to connect. We don't have to do it through social media, but it does make it easier to find and catch up with folks. And I get some support, I think, and I find some enjoyment in celebrating the achievements of other folks. I only do one platform, but I would say that one of the biggest issues about social media is it's uh, it's double messages about everything, right?
What do you mean?
It's giving double messages about everything. It's saying, like, you should just believe in yourself and only focus on who you are, but you need to have a lot of followers. It's saying that appearance doesn't matter, but it's giving you endless beauty tips. It's saying that good people should thrive, but it's rewarding horrible people with lucrative careers hawking hate, right? Like, it's saying that everyone, like, just as soon as it says we've got a lot of friends, it says someone's gonna just leave something horrible in your comments. So it just feels to me like, because it's a social thing and we tend to look to other people for some sort of guidance about what we're supposed to do with our lives, and it's constantly sending us mixed messages. It's sending us in opposite directions all the time. And if we haven't already figured out who we are, what we're about, or we don't have other supports outside of social media to develop those skills of understanding what our lives are about,
Yeah.
then it's social media gives us a hopeless task, because it just seems to elevate a particular kind of person who is not what it doesn't map onto what other people or even those kinds of people say is what we should be doing in order to be successful or happy in life. So it just feels
Hmm.
like it doesn't give an answer, and I think it helps people just feel like they're spinning their wheels a lot, to be frank.
Couple of things you mentioned in there earlier on. You mentioned what we learned with the lockdowns of COVID, and I had the opportunity to during that time meet someone who's become a good friend of mine and a collaborator. We wrote a book together called Lodestar, and he's Dr. George Everly. He's 40 years on the faculty between Harvard and Johns Hopkins. He's still at Johns Hopkins, and he wrote an article in Psychology Today. I think it was in April of 20, so right after the lockdown started, and he hypothesized what the impact of that lockdown would be on us socially, psychologically. And the big takeaway from that was, when we talk about relationships, we think about our spouse, our parents, our siblings, our friends, our kids. But he talked about the importance of those casual micro relationships. Uh, 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 I mentioned we had this event at our office building in Manhattan last night. The fact that I see the same doorman all the time and he's always got a big smile and he always waves, that matters to me. The fact that the place I stop for tea in the morning is usually the same person every morning. She's got a big smile and it's good to see her. That matters to me. And you didn't realize how much those little micro contacts mattered until they weren't there.
Yep.
And the second piece of that concern is you mentioned with social media, the whole we go back to when you were kids, when you were a kid in Minnesota, the need to belong, the emergence of influences. I wonder what that overall impact of influences and how it shapes our attitude about our role in life and our ability. I met a young lady last week who's an influencer, and she's fairly new to the game. She has 100,000, 200,000 followers, I think. Lovely young lady. And we met at one of our newest store on Long Island, a Harry and David store. And I didn't know her or anything about her until I got to meet her that day. And my job was to give her a little tour of the store, explain some of our products. We have Moose Munch over here. We have our Vital Choice Better For You food over here. We have our pears from Harry and David here. And so I gave her a tour of the store. But I was so interested in her life now. She's a young girl, early 20s. Her mom was there with her, who looked like she was in her early 20s too. You get to be my age, everybody looks like they're in their early 20s. And her mom is but now her mom is a producer. She's running around with her iPhone, videotaping our conversation. And I didn't realize we were being videotaped at the moment. But here's a young lady who's now, her career is her name is Ariana, and her influencer name is the Hungry Fork, and she goes around doing food reviews and taking pictures, and she's created a business out of being an influencer. There were influencers back in Minnesota, I'm sure, but they didn't have 100 and 200,000 followers and making a living at it.
Yeah.
But someone did decide, as you pointed out earlier, which place had the best pizza in town.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, lucky for us, there was only two places. But yeah. Yeah. So I think I think there isn't something to say about influencers as a whole. I think for me, the thing to say is, what role does society want influencers to have? And to me, they are like the doormen. So it's interesting. I was speaking at South by Southwest, and I'm a Gen X guy.
That must have been fun.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up on all those independent weekly newspapers, those
Sure.
beautiful things, the city pages, Twin Cities Readers, the Willamette Weekly, all those sorts of things. And, South by Southwest was where you find out about the cool bands. And it just
Yes.
seemed like so amazing.
Look at how that brand has changed the brand of Austin, Texas.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. It owns the city, which was fascinating. But I thought about,
But it started out just as off the beaten path music, right?
yeah,
And now it's this tech influencer conference. It's exploded.
movie premieres. That's what I was like, wait, there's a film festival. I've always wanted to go to a film festival too. And the timing of my trip was the first half is about the film releases and the second half is about the music. There's some about education before that I didn't know about. And then throughout is the tech and
So what
influencer
was your
stuff.
talk about there?
What's that?
What was your talk about?
My talk was about meaning and purpose in life and how that's maybe a better alternative to empty happiness to consider if you want to have a good life. So I was part
Mm,
of a panel with Karen Guggenheim and Ala Klemenko and Elisa Suarez, who we all kind of go back to the World Happiness Summit. And so the
sure.
talk was called Happiness is Not What You Think. And so there's a talk on resilience.
That
Mine
was
was on
provocative.
purpose. There's a talk about joy. And there was a talk about how oftentimes we chase the wrong things in life. Which all ties to social media, of course, in some ways, because social media holds out lots of different things. But I think of influencers and I was really interested in I saw celebrities. I never see celebrities, right? Like, but they're there for these movie things. And if I say, you know, if I say I saw Ben Affleck, it's not that anyone's impressed with me for seeing Ben Affleck. Or I actually accidentally walked in right into the theater right behind him. I didn't for his premiere of The Accountant 2, which I didn't see The Accountant 1, but I could get into that
If you
one.
like action, you loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was pretty hilarious that I just happened to show up and there was still space, and I walked in just as Ben Affleck was finishing the paparazzi thing, and I just like was I was right behind him until
That's pretty neat.
they said go the other way. I was like, okay. But so if I say I met Ben
They didn't
Affleck,
confuse you for Ben Affleck?
I hate to say it, but I'm taller. He's a tall guy, but I'm taller, and he's way more muscular, and he's much nicer dressed, and probably funnier. So, but like if I say that I met him, it's not like that means I'm a better person, but it gives someone the touch tone, like
Gives you
that
something to
touch
talk
tone.
about.
Yeah, they're like, we know the same person. He's like the
Yeah.
doorman. He's like the
I see.
person
Yeah,
who
yeah.
stocks the tea. And I think that's part of the celebrity thing. We used to grow up and you would get sick of the same places. Like I
Hmm.
can't remember who he was talking to, but Larry David was talking about growing up in Brighton Beach with two other people who had made it big as well. And they all knew the same people. And they all like they grew up in New York City, in Brooklyn,
Yep.
but in this small part of New York City. And you
And
saw
it's
the
an isolated community. It's not like, just Brighton Beach is, if you're from Brighton Beach, you're from Brighton Beach.
yeah. Yeah, but people talk about, areas of Harlem where you went 2 blocks one way, 2 blocks the other way, or the
Yep.
Lower East Side or other places. And so everywhere, even in the cities, you kind of saw the same faces. You know what I mean? Like
And you belonged.
you belonged. Or like
Yeah.
I rewatched Do the Right Thing recently, and it's all about people who know each other. And yet, of course, in that movie, some things go horribly wrong. But like you knew people, everyone
Mm.
knew Radio Rakim, right? And Do the Right Thing. Everyone knew the guy who would really be on your case if you tried to take some extra candy, on
Mhm.
the way out the door. And everyone
Sure.
knew the person who'd like give you a donut, if you looked kind of down that day. So I think
It goes back to the
celebrities,
work of Dr. Shabazz.
yeah,
Hey, we need people to understand that they belong to different micro communities.
yeah. And I think influencers and celebrities become when our societies are too big and scattered, they become the doorman, they become the shop owner who you can trust, they become the shop
Hmm.
owner who's mean to you. They become the neighbor who, if you kick the ball in their yard, they keep it or stab it with a knife and throw it back to you flat, or they're the one who give it back to you with a glass of lemonade, right? So I think like that's how I view celebrities, influencers. And they do whatever they do. There's probably some that are beautiful people and some that are wretched monsters, right? But for the rest of us, we want though they populate our neighborhoods, our global neighborhoods with names that we know, and they help us feel a little bit rooted and connected to random people that we don't otherwise have a connection point with.
Well, it's frustrating talking to you because I don't want the time to end, but it has. And
Thank you.
You touched on so many interesting things. You're such an interesting and thoughtful man and teacher and researcher. I hope we get to do this again. You're just a delight to talk to, and I've learned so much in our time together. And I look forward to doing it again. I hope I can corral you on the right time zone to connect again sometime soon.
You just had to bring that up, that I don't know how to read a clock or a calendar. Well, thanks, Jim. I really appreciate your kind words, and you give me a second shot at a time zone matchup here. So I appreciate the conversation you led us through.
Well, my treat, and thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much.